Well, hello, friends. We're now in week 3 of social isolation. And I didn't want to get too far into this whole ordeal without talking a little bit about lament and grief. Because we're all probably feeling it in some way, shape, or form these days. Or if we're not really feeling it yet, there probably will come a time in this next month that we're going to feel it. And even if you don't do that, grief is something you feel throughout your life. So it's helpful to know how to move through our grief and to navigate that in healthy ways. But first we need to talk about the word shalom. It's a Hebrew word that shows up in the Old Testament often because the Old Testament is written in the Hebrew language. But usually it's translated into the English word peace. Now, in our sort of modern minds, the word peace usually translates to something like an absence of conflict or tranquility or sort of, more of a passive idea. Or maybe we think of it more as a sort of absence or even avoidance of conflict. But really, shalom is actually all about action. It's not about avoiding all the negative things in life. Shalom actually includes grief and lamenting. One of my favorite movies of all time is called A Monster Calls. It's about the story of a sort of middle school boy who is being bullied at school, while at the same time his mother is very sick and is dying. And it's not a happy movie. It's all about grief and learning how to lament well. And I like it not because I'm like some glutton for sadness or anything. What I love about it is that it shows that being able to express grief and lament is a vital part of living our life to the fullest. In other words, it's a vital part of seeking shalom. Now, when I talk about in this video lament and grief, I think of grief more as sort of the experience, or maybe even a noun if we're getting very grammatical, and lament or lamenting more as the verb. So when I use those two terms, that's kind of what I'm talking about. But in the Bible, lamenting always arises out of some experience of suffering or pain or trouble. I think sometimes we have a difficult time doing this, lamenting, because we always feel like there's someone who has it worse, and so we have no excuse to be complaining or crying or grieving. And that's probably true. That's probably true for every single person, that there's always someone who has it worse. There's always someone who has less. There's always someone whose experience of pain or suffering is more extreme than ours. But what's also true is that self-censoring our experience, I think, really isn't helpful for ourselves or for anybody else. If we can't really experience and express our own grief and pain, I'm not sure we're really going to be able to step into someone else's experience to walk alongside them in their grief and pain. Now, maybe if your biggest grief or lament is that you don't have the newest iPhone, maybe you need to rethink your outlook on life if that's your biggest grief. But right now, this situation of social isolation, where now we're trying to move school online and you still can't see friends and maybe activities are canceled, that is still worth lamenting. We're teachers, parents, healthcare workers, principals, students, we're all lamenting because everything's been thrown into disarray and we feel really disoriented. And I think that's worth lamenting. It's about lamenting the fact that you're missing out on something, that something's missing in your life, whether that's the ability to tap into your God-given creativity, your ability to gather in community and form human connections, your ability to work and add goodness to this world. We're missing out on that kind of stuff. And we feel, and that's all been kind of thrown into disarray at this point in our world. And here's really the core of it. You are made in the image of a God who grieves at the pain and the trouble and the suffering of the world. And in other words, you're made to grieve. You're made to step into this and to express it. Grief will happen to us. It's not usually something that we choose, but how we deal with it or participate in it, whether our own grief or someone else's, that matters. I'm gonna give you a practice this week that will help you participate in the grief that you're feeling currently or may feel in the coming weeks. And so I'm calling this the good grief practice. This is something that you can say sort of silently to yourself, something you can say out loud. It's something you can journal in. I have my own journal that I like to write my thoughts in and my prayers, and also got my favorite pen that I like to write with. But you can do this in a number of different ways. The good grief practice. Step 1 is just acknowledging and greeting God. You could say something really formal like, "Dear God," like you're writing a letter. If you actually want to say hello, use those words. I often like to just say the words, "Oh God," as if I'm just trying to get God's attention. The second step is just naming the things that are disappointing you. Just name all of it. Get it all out there. Don't feel like you're saying too much or complaining too much. I know sometimes that can feel really selfish, but just name it. Then the next thing is remember a time that you actually got through. A hard time where you actually made it to the other side. This will actually give you just a little bit of strength to make it through what may be a tough day, a tough week, surely maybe a tough month ahead. But remember a time that was really difficult, but that you got through so that it can serve as strength for today. The second to last thing is just make your requests known to God. So you've named your disappointment. You've tried to find strength from a past experience. Now just tell God what it is that you want. That's really an important thing in a relationship with a person just as much as it is with God. Tell God what it is that you want. And finally, finish just with some words of gratitude. Just acknowledging that you are alive today, thanking God that maybe you woke up to experience another beautiful day. Just to thank God that you are listened to, that God hears you, but end in gratitude. So that's the good grief practice. It's a way to name the things that are troubling us, that are bringing us pain or maybe even suffering. We don't need to self-censor. All we need to do is tell God what is troubling us, what we're grieving. And if we can do that for ourselves, we may be able to better help others grieve as well. It's a practice that will serve us now in this time of social isolation, but will also serve us for the rest of our lives.